Hello again, baseball fans, and welcome back. Finally,
In a minute.
it's been a minute. It's been several minutes. I wish I could count as high as it has been actual minutes. But welcome into another episode of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. It has been quite a hiatus. I think it's been 3 weeks now. So forgive us and thank you for sticking with us through all of this. Happy to be back with my partner here, Joe Doyle, with another episode of MLB Draft Weekend Review. So, Joe, plenty of stuff to get into. One thing that we're really going to focus on in this episode is the top 10 of the upcoming MLB draft, the top 10 draft order. We have the mock draft 2.0, which will be live at Prospects Live tomorrow, I believe, right?
Tomorrow morning. Yeah, probably right around lunchtime Eastern.
Okay, so right around noon Eastern tomorrow, you can go to prospectslive.com and check out the mock draft 2.0. I believe there will be probably 5 mock drafts in total, so you'll definitely want to check this one out. There's been plenty to address in terms of the college ranks. As the college season has progressed, there's only 5 weekends left of the college baseball season.
Isn't that crazy? God, I feel like we were doing show number 1, recapping weekend number 1. I guess it was like 7 weeks ago, and man, it flies by every year.
So along those lines, right, because it has been a few weeks, and there are some things that we've probably seen over the last couple of weeks that obviously we didn't get a chance to talk about on air, but let's kind of take some time here. What are some of those things, Joe, that you've learned over the last couple of weeks that we haven't been on air? I guess what are some of those things that you've learned?
I think, despite the fact that they've lost a couple of times, I think Tennessee is just, for me, head and shoulders so much better than every other team. At least going into Omaha, I think Tennessee is the odds-on favorite. But just in terms of, the draft, the more we approach July and the more some of these arms like Reggie Crawford and Connor Prelip and Peyton Palette's a ways away, but the closer we get and the more conversations I have, the more I just feel pretty good about some of these injured college arms going earlier in the draft than I think we probably gave them credit for in January and February.
So you talked about Reggie Crawford. Who are some of those guys? Like we did talk about, I wish I had the graphic with me right here, but we talked, I think it was probably the 3rd or 4th episode, about several of those college arms. And you even talked about how this could be the weakest, I guess, if you will, draft class when it comes to college arms. Now, having said what you just said, do you feel significantly more confident in these college arms, or is it just a matter of those injuries are kind of in the rearview mirror and guys are starting to slowly get healthy, and so that's why maybe you feel a little bit differently? Their stock might be turning a little bit.
I don't think I want to make sure that I say I don't think I was ever in the camp of this is the worst group of college like talent that we've ever seen, but I just thought in terms of hype and excitement around draft day, I thought it was going to be hard to capture because there's going to be so many college arms that just simply, hardly pitched this year, that I thought there was going to be a lot of quote unquote damaged goods. I've thought for a long time that 4, 5, 6 years from now, we're going to look back at this class and say, it was a pretty average college pitching class. But in terms of some of the names, Landon Sims pops out as a guy that I'm not sure if he's going to be a starter at the big league level. But I have a pretty good feeling that he's going to be at least a high leverage reliever. And when he is healthy, he's going to be able to move pretty quickly in whatever system he ends up in. Connor Prelip at Alabama, last year was an option to go 1-1 in this class. He's basically not pitched in 2 years, but it seems like, being a lefty that throws 97 with a good slider and a good changeup, he's got a good shot at going in the first round. Peyton Palette at Arkansas, a kid that throws 97 with maybe the best curveball in the class, really electric arm. He's got a good chance to go in the top 40 or 50 picks. Reggie Crawford is a two-way star at UConn who's got immense power at the plate, up to 101 from the left side on the Cape Cod League with a really devastating slider that he needed to learn how to command. And then, I mean, you keep going down the list, and it's like Carson Wisenhunt with the suspension, and Adam Meyer with the elbow injuries, and now we'll talk about Hunter Barco in a bit. But I think this college class is going to end up being okay down the line, and maybe it's a maybe it's a good thing that these guys are getting it out of the way early in their career. But in terms of just proven stuff on draft day, that's going to be a little bit more tricky to quantify in July.
So out of all those names that you just mentioned, Reggie Crawford is one that kind of stands out a bit to me, simply because I've started to turn and I've started to change my opinion a little bit about the cold weather arms and the New England or the Northeast or the Midwest cold weather city, whether it's a high school prep arm or whether it's a college arm, because I think there is something to be said about those guys that don't have all that wear and tear. Here we are sitting here talking about injuries. Most of these injuries are arm injuries, and a lot of these arm injuries are sustained because guys are overworked, or they're not conditioned and they're not trained properly for the amount of workload that they're getting. Right. So I think there is something to be said about the guys that are up north and don't have the access and ability, to pitch year round, to throw year round. So a guy like Reggie Crawford certainly sticks out to me. I'd be really curious. I think for my money, he's probably, I don't know if he's my most intriguing of those names that you just mentioned. But I guess I'll ask you this, Joe. Is there one name of those guys that you think is far and away the better pro prospect? When all is said and done, if everyone comes back to full health, is there a guy of those injured arms that you feel is the best pro ready?
Yeah, believe it or not. So let me comment really quick on Reggie Crawford, because I think he's a really polarizing name. It's a guy that, in 2021, he hit 300 with 13 home runs as a first baseman. The guy's a legit offensive prospect. We talk about Reggie Crawford like he's been pitching in college baseball forever. I mean, he's got 8 innings. He's got 8 innings at UConn. He pitched 8 innings on the Cape Cod League. Like, he's got 16 recorded innings in his collegiate career over two seasons. But I mean, in those 16 innings, he has 31 strikeouts and 10 walks. So, like, you have to ask, is the command going to be there to be a starting pitcher at the pro level? I don't know. But whenever you talk about a lefty that's a two-way guy that can throw it 101, 102, at least recorded once, it's kind of like that circus freak. Where do you find guys like this? So he's going to be really interesting on draft day. I think Reggie Crawford is a guy that I could see going in the top 15 if someone falls in love with him. But I also think he's a guy that could go undrafted if nobody believes in the sample size. I look back at the list that I just provided, and while I really like Landon Sims, I think if there was one guy in that group that I would want personally in my organization, I think it would be Peyton Palette. And the reason is I think he's one of the best athletes of the group. He's got a curveball that's over 3,000 RPMs. He commanded it pretty well for a 19-year-old. And he's got a fastball that was, 93 to 96 up to 98. Smaller framed guy. He really does remind me a lot of Walker Buehler. That's probably the name that I would like the most, but I understand that, given the frame, it's like 175, 180 pounds. Given the frame, you do have to worry, like, is this guy going to break down over the long haul?
So you brought up Hunter Barco, and a few weeks back we spoke, and I told you, for my money, Hunter Barco I have as the best pitching prospect in this draft class. And now, obviously, there's a little bit of issue there, sitting here talking about injuries, and now there's the more injuries on the pitching front in terms of Hunter Barco and a couple other guys. What are your what's your takeaway from some of these recent pitching injuries?
Yeah, I mean, the Hunter Barco one really hurts because it's a guy with a prospect pedigree. I mean, he was a big deal in high school, and he never took that next step of becoming the lefty, the Patrick Corbin, the guy that throws 97. He never got there. This year, he started showing signs of making progress. I mean, he's touching 95. The slider was sharper, and he was starting to turn over some changeups. Fastball shape was better, and now he's breaking down. I don't know. The thing with Barco with me is he never the stuff never dominated, right? He never showed next level stuff. And so I think when you're talking about a guy like that, a guy that's a college performer without maybe awesome stuff, it hurts him in the draft if the elbow injury is significant. We had him as a fringe first round guy, kind of in that 30 to 40 range, and I do think if this is a serious arm injury, it probably brings him down into the end of the second round range. In terms of some of the other injuries that we've seen right now, I mean, Dylan Lesko has been shut down for the rest of the year with some arm soreness. There's been some rumors floating around about exactly how serious that is, but I'm not going to be one to, speculate. I do think he's shown enough over the last 4 years since he was 13 or 14 years old to still go in the top 10. And then Jonathan Cannon at Georgia. Guy's been lights out. I mean, he's not walking anybody. I've always had him a second round pick. He's missed a couple of starts with arm soreness. He seems like he's going to be back this week. I don't think it really changes anything. He's a command over stuff guy. I still think he's going to be a second or third rounder.
All right. So I'm going to pull up a quick, some video here that we have from both of those guys. You mentioned Hunter Barco and Jonathan Cannon. So just to give you guys an idea of what we will no longer be seeing for this college season with a guy like Hunter Barco.
Got him. We just focus on being a head coach. Alabama going to be. You're wrong. He's worked his tail off as down. Got him. Boy, he was feel. Got him.
He's the way I can pitch that and adjust to them.
Toddler programs. That's who they see midweek. As Fago's got looking. Mez strikes out.
So I think one of the things that really sticks out to me there is that's a look at his 10 strikeout performance from earlier on this season. And he gets strikeouts everywhere.
Yeah.
He gets strikeouts on every quadrant of the plate, whether it's a right-handed hitter or a left-handed hitter. And I think that's really important when you talk about success at the next level. It's being able to get, to have that dominance on any part of the play. And then also the Jonathan Cannon.
I'd say 50.
Just more great stuff there from Jonathan Cannon.
I love the woman in the stands that just says before the last strikeout, you suck.
So I like the one. I think it was the third guy. I think it was the third strikeout, and there's a guy, and you can just hear him. The ball's not even left the pitcher's hand. He's like, "Sit down," or it's like,
yeah. I'll say this, man. Speaking on Barco, there might not be a guy. Maybe Landon Sims falls in this category, but there might not be a guy that I just enjoy watching pitch more than Hunter Barco. Because you're right, he commands the fastball to both sides of the plate. It's got a little bit more hop this year. He's missing bats with it. It's really a shame that he wasn't able to stay healthy for the rest of the year, because I really think Hunter Barco is going to be a guy that can touch 97 when he's fully developed. The frame just looks to me like it needs to get into and I mean this respectfully, it just needs to get into a player development system, add some muscle, lean up a little bit, and he's going to be throwing harder. So I think someone's going to be really happy with taking him in the second round.
Could we envision a scenario where he doesn't sign?
I mean, I don't know why that would happen, just because if it's as bad as it could be, if it's Tommy John surgery, he's not going to pitch next year anyways. And if that's the case, there's really no reason for him to go back to Florida. You might as well prove it at the pro ranks.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, if there
that's
was
also, that is presumptive. I don't know that it's fully gone.
right, if there's any chance, if it's not the worst case scenario and he's definitely going to miss all of next season, you could make the case, right, that if he could come back next season he would be a junior. We have to remember here, we're talking about a draft eligible sophomore. So he could presumably come back if he felt like his draft stock fell too much because of this injury. And you mentioned second round, but what if it's not? Right?
Yeah.
What if teams just aren't there? What if it ends up like third or fourth round? And then you're talking about, well, how bad is that injury? And would he entertain the idea of coming back if he could pitch to potentially boost that draft stock? I mean, we've seen it before.
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
Look at Jaden Hill.
Right.
Jaden Hill went in the second round. He was projected to go all over the board. He could have gone back to school and pitched for LSU. But here's the thing. Like, I think there's two ways of going about this. If it is a forearm strain, if it is a UCL damage of some sort, if it is needing to be reconstructed, he's going to miss all of next year anyways. You might as well sign. If it doesn't, if it's a Lance McCullers type of situation where he needs, rest and rehab for the next 6 to 8 months, my take on it is I would still sign, because at that point you're really pitching on borrowed time. Once you damage that UCL, if you go back and pitch again, and you don't get the surgery, a lot of times guys end up needing that surgery ultimately at some, I look at the Lance McCullers situation and I just go, he doesn't need it now, but I mean, what are the chances that he's going to need it? So if you're talking about a pitcher in college, just take your second or third round money and go pro. That would be what I would do.
Yeah, it reminds me, I think, too, it's funny you bring up Lance McCullers, but I think it was the Yankees with, I don't know if it was Masahiro Tanaka.
Yeah, it was. And he never went.
He never went. I feel like we all thought, get the surgery, regardless of whether or not it's mandatory. Just get it, because one, you might never be the same if you don't, and two, you might just be prolonging the inevitable. And he just never did. And obviously it's easy to say in hindsight that it probably impacted his career. But
maybe, I don't know, he got those PRP injections and he made it work. Right. And Tanaka went out on his own time, which was kudos.
Right, he did. I mean, hey, look, he went back to Japan, which is probably great for him.
He had a great career.
How about a couple of things that we may have seen early on this season and probably thought people might be overreacting a little bit to them, or maybe not paying enough attention to them, that we said, nah, pump the brakes a little bit. Everything will be fine. Things will correct themselves. How about some trends that maybe haven't corrected themselves? A couple things that, here's one that I'll throw out there, because we talked about it on the show. We talked about Trey Lipscomb, and we talked about how in our original top 400 prospects, he was outside the top, I believe he was outside the top 200. He was outside
the top 300. I want to say he was like 311.
So obviously not thinking he was going to keep up that early season success, but Joey has.
Yeah.
Right. So guys like that, or maybe the reverse, right? Guys that struggled that we thought might turn it around. Is there anything that you've noticed that maybe your eye's been drawn to this season?
The first guy that comes to mind for me, and I guess it's going to be a tip of the cap to myself and to Ian Smith. Connor Stain was a guy that we identified early in the spring prior to his first start as a guy that had just kind of turned things up from when he transferred from Maryland. He's at 32 innings and he hasn't given up a run. He's got 56 strikeouts. I think we labeled him as a guy that is a big time dark horse to be a first or a second round pick. And as things kind of stand right now, he sure looks like he's going to be, a top 75 pick. So Connor Stain really standing out. The guy that comes to mind, and I know he's one of the most famous conversation pieces over the last 2 years, but Judd Fabian. Judd Fabian had a terrible first 2 or 3 weeks. K rate was at 34%. He wasn't hitting. I was like, all right, Judd Fabian that we've been accustomed to. And he's really turned things around. I mean, his strikeout rate's down a little bit below 18% at this point. He's hitting for more power than he did last year. He's hitting for more average. So I think Judd Fabian has done pretty well for himself in this class. I don't know if he's going to go, way higher than 40 where he went last year, but I do think that he's still in that range. I think he did well for himself.
It's because he's playing with his brother every day.
It
right?
is, man. That family tie.
Man. So you bring up
upstage Derek every day.
And he's trying to, because let's be honest, Joe, the younger brother is always the better of the two, right?
I'm the older brother, man. I don't subscribe to that. I'm the oldest in my family. And I think
we'll tell that to Corey Seager. Okay.
okay.
So you bring up Connor Stain and the 75 mark there. Right now, I believe was at number 82 in our most recent top 400. Are we talking fringe second round?
I mean, for us, he's firmly in the top 2 rounds. I can give you a little look under the hood. So this hasn't been updated, and it's not going to be updated for at least another 3 weeks as we continue to take in more information and more data. But Connor Stain is up to number 59 right now on our board. So fairly comfortably in the second round, but I think he could move up even more than that with another couple of strong weeks. You just don't see guys post a 0 ERA and like 16 or 17 strikeouts per 9 over the course of an entire season. And he's got a great pro body. He throws 97 with hop, and he's got 2 breaking balls. It's a very good prospect.
So do you remember where he was at the beginning, like the initial top 400, right? I thought he was like 200, like 180s ish or something.
I think that's about right. I want to say before. So we did the top 200, and this was in probably December. And I should just pull it up, but I want to say Stain was like 145 or 148. So, I mean, he's really staked his claim. You can't be that aggressive with a guy before he's pitched an inning in February, but we were talking internally like, hey, this guy looks like a top 3 round type of a prospect, and that's kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see a guy that was like we said, around the 150 mark, and then moves up to the 75, 80 mark. And now, spoiler alert, finds himself firmly, at this point in the second round. So just, I mean, it just goes to show there's always guys that sort of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but I guess this is one of those names that he was not on everybody's radar. He was a transfer who had never even thrown a pitch for the school. So, great job by Connor Stain. I guess great job by you, Joe, being there, and
Smitty. I mean, Smitty went out and got the live looks. He got the video. He kind of confirmed everything that I had seen in the data and just in talking to some different coaches. But I mean, he went out and Ian went out and got the footage. So that's out on YouTube. It's out on Twitter. If you don't follow Ian, definitely follow Ian, because he's kind of got Florida locked down.
All right, so let's get into the draft preview a little bit, because again, tomorrow, for those of you just tuning in, tomorrow sometime around noon Eastern time, don't hold us, give or take an hour maybe, but sometime around that noon Eastern window will be the mock draft 2.0, where you can go and get a look at how many rounds was it, Joe? Is it just the first?
This is just going to be day 1. So you'll get the first round, but you'll also get all 7 Comp A picks.
So the first 37 picks of the draft.
Yeah, something like that.
Will be mocked out. So you can check that out tomorrow. But Joe, I wanted to kind of take a minute and preview the top 10 a little bit, right? Like look at some of those teams that are drafting in the top 10 and kind of get an idea of where they might go based on history, where they might go based on need, things like that. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about those teams. Baltimore drafting first overall, Arizona, Texas, Pittsburgh, Washington, Miami 6th, the Cubs at 7, the Twins, Royals, and Rockies round out the top 10. So you can see right there what the top 10 looks like, and then also who they selected last season and what pick that was. Joe, one thing that really sticks out to me here is that of those players, only 3 of them were college prospects. So what does that say about a team's propensity to lean towards the prep player a little bit more in the first round, right? I mean, obviously this is just last year, and we could go back and we could look at significant trends if we wanted to. But obviously when you look at Texas taking Jack Leiter, Pittsburgh taking Henry Davis, and then the Cubs taking Jordan Wicks, those are the only college players that these teams selected with their first pick.
Yeah, I mean, talking in generalizations, like the 2021 draft class was maybe it might be the best high school shortstop class we've ever seen.
Sure.
And if it's not the best, it's definitely in the top 3, 4, 5. It was a very good high school shortstop class, and high school shortstops are kind of how you, in a lot of people's eyes, it's kind of how you define the health of the class, right? Because a lot of the shortstops that you see at the big league level are either 1, coming from the international ranks, or 2, drafted as high schoolers. They're just kind of identified early as different breeds, if you will. In terms of, how this 2022 class differs from last year, certainly not as heavy on the shortstop side. Jackson Holiday, I think, is a very good high school shortstop prospect, and Termarr Johnson, who, whether you think he's a shortstop or a second baseman, he's a very good high school infield prospect. But other than that, it kind of thins out until you get down into the Jet Williams, Mikey Romero's, those kinds of guys. High schoolers in the outfield, however, Drew Jones, Elijah Green, there's some really impressive Justin Crawford. There's some impressive high school, just pure athletes, center fielders in this class that I think are going to vault up this class. But another thing that I think is just vastly, vastly different this year is there's so many good college hitters. I mean, there's going to be 6 or 7 college hitters at the top of this class that deserve to be top 15 picks. And last year, I mean, you look at this board, Henry Davis was arguably the only college bat that people were in love with at the top. Colton Cowser had his believers, but I don't even think we had him in our top 10. So we'll see what happens. It's a much, much healthier class in terms of proven college performers, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and forgive the typo here. The Arizona Diamondbacks didn't take Marcelo Mayer. They took Jordan Lawler, and that was at 1-6, right, not 1-4. That 1-4 was the Red Sox, not the Diamondbacks. Do you see Baltimore going crazy like we've seen them do in the past? I feel like Baltimore is sort of that.
They can't do it again.
Right? Well, but why, Joe? Why? Why can't they do it again? Like, why don't they just take Drew Jones? Why? Why not just take him? You know they're not going to, Joe.
I think Baltimore is going to take one of the big 3, and you'll see which member of the big 3 we think they're going to take in tomorrow's mock draft. But the high school at the top of this class is just too strong to turn down. And like I would understand if Baltimore went and selected a Kevin Parada. I would. Like, I get it. Or a Jace Young. But I just don't think this is the year to do it. And it's important to remember, like, Baltimore has a Comp A pick. They have more money than everyone else already. So if you want to, go and get another high schooler with the 32nd pick in the draft, or you want to, get creative with your money in the 3rd and 4th round, you can use that Comp A pick to achieve that. I mean, Baltimore picks at 1, they pick at 32, they pick at 39. I just don't know, when you have that much money and there's this much talent on the high school ranks at the top of this class, how you can go away from one of these high school hitters. I'll tell you the only way that it makes sense. And I don't think this is the Baltimore way. So mind you that. This is one of the best high school pitching classes I have ever seen. I've been doing this since 2011. This is year 11. I haven't been doing this, as robust as for the last 10 years, but I've never seen a high school pitching class this deep. If Baltimore were to want to go get 4 or 5 of the best high school pitching prospects in this class, kind of similar to what Pittsburgh did last year, maybe I can see it happening. But I just don't think high school pitching is Baltimore's MO, and I don't think it's going to be the case this year.
Well, if high school pitching is not Baltimore's MO, well, then you, my friend, are no longer being followed by Grayson Rodriguez.
Hey, listen, Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall are two extremely talented prospects, and I know that they're both high school. But at the same time, Baltimore has been going the college bat route. They've been going the bat route in general so heavy the last 2 years, and I think that's going to continue.
All right. One other thing that I noticed about this is that you see a name like Frank Mosicato there, taken 7th overall by the Royals last season. Is there a player? So Mosicato entering last year's draft was just barely inside our top 50 prospects. He came in entering the draft at number 49 overall. So obviously to see him go 7th was a huge stretch. And I remember, Joe, during our live broadcast last year, that was a huge talking point. It was almost as big a talking point as the Orioles not taking Jordan Lawler at 5 and letting him go to Arizona, but I digress. Do you see anyone in this year's class that is around that top 50, maybe just barely inside or maybe even outside the top 50 that could conceivably work their way into this top 10 here?
Yeah, so I'm going to go off of the list that we currently have, and this list is going to change, so take this with a grain of salt, but I would love to answer this question again like a week before the draft. I think it'd be a really fun question. Names right now that are currently outside of our top 50 that I think could work their way into the top 5 conversation, or top 7 or top 8. Andrew Dukanich out of Indianapolis, Indiana, from I think it's Brebu Jesuit Prep, is a righty that has been really blowing up boards this spring. He's up to 97. He's been holding 93 or 94 into the 6th inning. He's got a 3,000 RPM slider, the potential for 2+, maybe double plus pitches. I think he's a guy that if the draft were today, there's a pretty good chance, even though he's ranked 53 on our board right now, that he goes in the first round. So that's a name that is going to be higher on our next board anyways, but something to watch out for. Another one that I think is a long shot, but definitely a possibility, is Tucker Towman. He's a third baseman out of Hammond. Switch hitter, huge bat speed from the left side. It projects as a potential, above average power hitter, an average hitter, kind of a little bit of like Nolan Gorman vibes. I think that he has an outside shot of someone falling in love with him and going in that top 8, top 7 range. And then, one guy that I will point out that I think if he gets really hot over these last 5 weeks, Drew Gilbert, the outfielder at Tennessee, is a guy that has average to above average tools across the board. He just hasn't hit for enough game power. He's got above average raw power, but he hasn't hit for the game power this year. It's a plus arm in center field. It's an above average defender in center field. He is an average to solid average hitter with a great approach, and he's got an 80 grade personality, a competitive streak. I think Drew Gilbert, he's just one of those guys that, over the last 5, 6, 7 weeks, if he pounds 8 home runs or 7 home runs, I think that's a name that you could see in the top 15 pretty quickly.
All right, so let's take this time to go out to the chat and get a couple of questions out there, because we appreciate you guys and all the questions and obviously the patience. So we can't always just throw your questions in there right away. But I know Azad Earl here has a question about Cole Phillips post Tommy John. Is he still entrenched as a top 50 candidate?
Definitely a top 50 candidate, without question. I think the issue that Cole Phillips is going to run into going in the first round is he was a bit of a pop up. You know, he hasn't had this long runway of dominating. He just recently ran into his velo spike and he blew out. So that's something that he's going to be battling. And then the other thing with Cole Phillips is he never really had a great feel for a changeup, and the slider flashed average, sometimes solid average, but it was never something that he could go to as a swing and miss pitch commanded well. So I do think Cole Phillips has a lot of believers in the top 50. I don't think he's a slam dunk. I do think he's going to get paid, though.
I appreciate the question there. And then one more here. Obviously, we're not going to give away too much of what the mock draft looks like, but Gamers 2.0 here, clearly a Mets fan. They have 2 picks in the top 14. Obviously, they pick 11th as compensation for not signing Kumar Rocker, and then their their normal pick in at 14. So the Mets pick 11th and the Mets pick 14th. Any thoughts on where the Mets might go based on having those 2 middle first round picks?
I mean, I think the Mets need pitching. I think they've needed pitching for a few years, and I think they would be the first to admit that. Everyone in the industry expects them to go pitching. You kind of look at the top 15 from a glance. I'm looking at our current list, and there's not a lot of college pitching that's available in that region, although I do think there is, some. I think the Angels are going to be vying for some of that college pitching too, and I think they picked 12th. So you kind of look at the Gabriel Hughes at Gonzaga. You look at all of the high school pitchers. I know that we've mocked Brandon Barriara to the Mets quite a few times, but I just mentioned Dukanich. I think he makes a lot of sense. Blade Tidwell has been mocked to the Mets in the past. And then, as you go down the list, you talk about the Connor Prelips and you talk about maybe Cooper Jerpy out of Oregon State, although he's a little bit more of a data darling. I think he fits better with some other organizations. I think if Dylan Lesko somehow slips to that number 11 mark, I think I would be stunned if he made it past the Mets at that point. But I think if you're a Mets fan, you need to look at not only the Prospects Live board, but all of the other outlets out there and just look at pitching, because I do think that they're going to be targeting pitching early.
Well, and then also, I know one of your personal favorites, Adam Mazur, right? I mean, he's certainly in that, that might be a little bit early for him. But again, we've seen guys that were 30, 25, 30 entering the draft that go in that 12 to 15 range pretty frequently. So,
I mean, Mazur has fallen a little bit. So since our last update, he's really run into the walks again that plagued him last year. So if he comes back and he starts pounding the strike zone again, I definitely think he makes sense for some of those teams 11 to 15.
And then if they didn't, right? Like let's just amuse Gamers 2.0 here for a second. If they didn't go pitching, right? Because that's what they have to do and that's what they need to do. And they went a little off script, or at least off of what we think they should do. Let's go the hitter route for a second here and throw out a couple guys that maybe either from the high school ranks, if you think there's a guy there, or maybe a couple guys from the college ranks, which I think I would probably lean more towards the college bats for the Mets in that range. But what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, my mind definitely goes right to Drew Gilbert, who we just spoke about. But another guy that I think who makes a ton of sense is Cam Collier. I think he's the type of bat that they have gone after in the past. He's extremely young. They've certainly tended to go towards high school hitters over college hitters when they've gone that route. You look at Pete Crow Armstrong, for example. But I don't know. I look at Cam and I just think, you look at Brett Beatty, you look at Mark Vientos, you kind of look at some of these guys that they've drafted in the past, these power corner types. I think Collier has a lot of fans in the Mets organization, and it wouldn't surprise me if he went in that 11 or that 14 spot.
All right. So we've got the Mets picking twice. I believe they're the only team that selects twice in the first round. Yes. So 30 picks overall in the first round, and then the 7 comp picks, the Rockies, Reds, Orioles, Diamondbacks, Royals, Pirates, Guardians. The Rockies have 2, and then the Padres. So the Rockies actually pick 31 and 38 in addition to 10. So the Colorado Rockies, another team there that have a top 10 pick, obviously 10th overall, but then they pick 31 and they pick 38. Any thoughts on what the Rockies might do? Obviously they're kind of been talked about quite a bit lately just because we don't really know what they were thinking with the Chris Bryant signing. But they recently obviously went and got Zach Veen via the draft. So any thoughts on what they might do with those 3 picks?
So, I mean, I could go back and look at my information. I think the Rockies pick 10, and I think the Rockies pick 37 because there's 31 picks in the first round this year with the additional Mets pick. But you might be looking at 2021. In terms of, and I listen, my information could be wrong. I could be looking at something wrong. I tend to think with Bill Schmidt, their new general manager, in the fold, I think the Rockies are going to go after power. I think they're going to go after a power bat. I think they're going to go after a college performer. I think, you'll see tomorrow in the mock draft, but there's so many good college hitters that are currently available this year, and they're kind of right in that sweet spot to see who falls to them. I would expect them to go with a college bat.
I think the Rockies were 31 was compensation for Trevor Story.
Oh, you know what? I have not added the draft pick compensations. You're right. So those will be added tonight. I totally forgot about those. You're right. No, they do have more picks. I had only done the competitive balance picks. So, Chris, I want to thank you on this Wednesday night
for making you stay up late and do
ladies
more
and
work.
Gentlemen, for those of you that'll see the mock tomorrow, there will be more than 37 picks, and it remains to be seen how many exactly we're going to run into.
I think just 2. I think
Is it just 2?
The Rockies get 31 for Trevor Story, and the Reds get 32 for Nick Castellanos. I believe those are the 2 comps.
That I can deal with.
You can handle 2 extra picks, right, Joe?
That I can deal with. Yeah. So no,
All right.
That makes it very interesting. That's a lot of money for the Rockies to play with. So if someone falls into their lap from the high school ranks at 10, the Rockies aren't usually a team to go. I mean, Zach Veen is there. So I totally spaced on that. That's going to be a fun draft for Rockies fans.
All right. And then one more before we get out of here. We'll give Azad Earl one last question because you talked about Lesko. So he wants to know, considering the shutdown is precautionary, is NHSI enough to keep him in the top 5 to 10?
Yeah, and I don't even think it's NHSI. He was brilliant at NHSI, but he's also been brilliant since he was 15. I mean, everybody has seen Dylan Lesko since before he could drive a car. This is not like a Cole Phillips who, came out of nowhere for 4 months and then blew out. This is a guy that's just been the best high school pitcher for his class for a very long time. I think Lesko goes in the top 10.
Do we still think he's the first high school arm taken?
I do. I think there are some guys that may challenge some of these cold weather arms that haven't really picked up yet. Noah Schultz and Andrew Dukanich. I think those guys have a shot at really surging. But if the draft were today, I would still think it would be Lesko.
And then how about an update? Because one of the other high school arms that was kind of in that same category that we haven't really talked a lot about, Jackson Ferris.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson Ferris has been everything that we want him to. I should say he's been everything that you would expect him to be. He's been 93 to 95, touching 97. The curveball's been good. The command has been scattered. He's been hit a little bit. He's been great. He hasn't been spectacular. I still think Jackson Ferris goes in the first round, but I don't think he's any longer, in consideration to be the first high school pitcher off the board.
Well, all right, guys, tomorrow around noon Eastern time, the Prospects Live mock draft 2.0, you'll be able to check that out. There will be more as we get closer to the draft. After this one goes live tomorrow, there's probably going to be three more mock drafts before the actual 2022 Major League Baseball draft. So be sure to check that out. If you haven't already, go to Patreon and subscribe to get all the enhanced additional content that we have there too. For as little as $5 a month, you can get additional bonus content there, and we greatly appreciate all of that support. And if you do subscribe, come on the show and tell us that you subscribed, and we'll give you a couple shout outs. We'll give you a couple mentions on air in appreciation for those contributions to the site. So again, apologies for the hiatus. You have to forgive us, but we are back. The question was asked earlier in the chat, Joe. I didn't pull it up, but the question was asked in the chat: is this show coming back to a weekly basis? And a little part of me cried. And then I answered, yes, absolutely. We're back, baby.
We're back.
Let's do it. So, Joe, we'll get out of here on this. Next week, plenty more to talk about. So this will be Monday again. Obviously, this week was a little bit different. But Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, we will be back to our normal time as always right here. So for my co-host, Joe Doyle, I am Chris Dunn, thanking you again for tuning into another episode of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. Take care, everybody.